Author TN here, and welcome to my channel.
The night begins like any other for Tana. Perched on a stool in the dark, observing her prey as he sleeps, she sits and she waits. The man in the bed is sleeping so soundly. He stirs a bit, slightly pulling at the restraints Tana used to bind him to the bedposts. She watches and waits for him to wake, but the voices in her head are growing louder by the minute.
What the hell are you waiting for, Tana?
The deepest voice barrels into her psyche.
What's the matter? You scared?
Another voice taunts.
No, Barry's right. Tana, what's taking so long? This is taking too long. We should go.
The weakest of the three whimpers.
Shut up, Pee-wee. She doesn't need you siding with me.
Barry snaps at his worrisome counterpart.
Oh, the both of you pipe down.
Lana hushes the boys before turning her attention back to Tana.
You do need to hurry up. We ain't got all night to do this.
Tana shakes the voices from her mind in hopes of a solitary moment of silence.
What the hell is going on? Who's here?
The sleeping man finally wakes. Tana does her best not to move, not to make a sound. The man jostles around a bit more, becoming increasingly frustrated with his restraints and his captor's silence. She lets out a sigh, revealing her location, and giving her victim a direction to look in.
You. Over there in the corner, by the window.
He asks from the bed.
What are you doing here? What's the meaning of this?
She adjusts herself on the seat but refuses to speak. Lana begins to say something but is cut off by the man's voice.
Why don't you come out from the shadows? You know I can see you, right?
Normally, Tana never converses with her assignments. It tends to make the jobs more difficult. Yet, when the man speaks, it does something to her, something that she has never been able to do. He silences the voices. All three of them dare not utter a sound once his tone penetrates their universe. So she does as he asks and hops off the stool. Stepping into the moonlight of the window, the man is finally able to see her slender silhouette. Tana is in an all-black bodysuit that covers every inch of her athletic frame. She stands there like a living shadow.
How can you breathe in that?
He wonders, more out loud than to her. To his surprise, she answers.
The fabric isn't airtight. It's just meant to keep my DNA out of the crime scene.
The inquisitive look in his eyes immediately slips to one of sorrow. Minutes go by as he ponders the situation, but the silence feels like an eternity. He knows what the outcome of this scenario is. He knows how this plays out, but what the man in the bed cannot fathom is why he is still alive. Tana has obviously been waiting for him to wake up, but he has no idea why. The quietness of the room is too much, so he breaks it.
Why don't you just kill me already?
His tone is not one of fear but one of boredom. It strikes Tana as odd that he's not pleading for his life, like so many others had before him. The longer she stays in his presence, the more he intrigues her. He hushes the voices and he doesn't beg. She yearns for the knowledge of him. She craves the knowledge of his power and how it entrances her. To her amazement, none of her voices chime in, leaving her alone to decipher the being in front of her. Tana moves the stool she watched him from close to the bed and perches herself atop it once more. She looks to the man, who is still eerily calm.
Tell me, how is it that you remain so still when you know your soul is about to leave this earth?
He takes a deep breath and begins to impart his thoughts to her.
I know not who you are, only what. You are the predator. You are the hyena. You kill mercilessly without care, but only as a delusional means to your own survival. For if you cared, you wouldn't have waited to slaughter me with my eyes open. You stare at death and your victims and it feeds you. You are troubled by many inner demons and battle with them constantly. Can I share a story with you?
Before she has a chance to respond, he adds.
This will be in no way to disarm you or dismay you from completing your task here tonight. only to give you something to think about as you live out the rest of your days.
She nods and anxiously waits to hear what other insights to her personality he could bestow upon her. And still her voices are silent. The man shuffles himself around a bit to get as comfortable as can be tied to the bed. Once he finds a suitable position, he tells her a tale of an old lion and a young elephant.
An elephant stumbled away from its herd one hot day. Instead of searching for its mother, it followed the loveliest scent of water wafting through the air. He trots with delight, and at first glance of the waterhole, he runs and dives into the murky wonderment. The young one splashes, plays, and swims without care to its surroundings. Now, of course, such a commotion can't go unnoticed. And before long, an old lion is resting on the riverbank, eyeing its next meal. The lion is sure that the young elephant will feast a feast fit for an abandoned king. So he watches, plots, and finally speaks. I say, dear boy, how is it that you, one as big as yourself, can dive into the deep and surely not drown? The elephant is startled at first, but he can see the weathered look in the old lion's eyes and believes little if any harm will come from this interaction. My trunk lets me breathe and my bulbous body keeps me afloat. Well, could you teach me a thing or two about this floating and breathing in the water business? The elephant looks at the lion curiously, cautiously. But to ease the panic setting in, the lion hobbles down to the edge of the water. The elephant calms once again after seeing how slow and crippled his would-be predator is. Well, lion, how can I teach you about breathing? You don't even have a trunk. That's okay, boy. I am sure that I can keep my head above the water. And how can I teach you about floating? You can barely walk, let alone wade in the water. That's okay. Moving in the water is much easier and far less painful than moving on land. Wouldn't you agree? I guess you're right. So come on in. I'll show you a thing or two. The lion took its time getting into the water, only walking in a few feet. He made sure to keep the riverbed under his paws. The elephant spent, and as the elephant backs up toward the lion launches himself out of the water onto the elephant's back, forcing it to sink into the mud of the riverbed. The old lion buries its claws into the elephant's face, grasps its trunk between its teeth, and drowns the young elephant. The lion uses every ounce of its withering strength to pull the feast out of the water.
Tana remains perched on the stool as she listens to the tale from the man in the bed. There were many lessons to be learned, but she wasn't sure which one was for her enlightenment. Her impatience gets the better of her.
Interesting story, but what's it to me?
The point is this. The things that happen to us and the decisions we make are all connected. They flow with the path of the universe and are often enacted to bring balance. When we blatantly ignore the path chosen for us, or the path that we chose for ourselves, obstacles and all kinds of signs are put in our way, often to the extreme, so we have no choice but to react accordingly. The young elephant had several signs and inclinations to leave, but in the end he lost his life. Which brings me to you, my dear. You are here because I ignored the signs. And while I was startled at first, your presence doesn't surprise me. So you may finish what you came here to do. But remember the weight that comes with the choices you make from this day on.
The man's last words whisper across the room solemnly with grace in hopes they touch the vile heart of the woman perching on the stool next to his bed. And from a pocket he never saw, Tana pulls out something shiny that glimmers in the moonlight. She moves from her seat and straddles him while he remains bound to the bed. With her thighs snug to his waist, she lays her head on his chest listening to his heartbeat. It's melodically rhythmic and refuses to race. She breathes in his scent hoping to embed it within her. To keep the voices quiet a little while longer. Somehow Tana knows it will be to no avail. She inhales his essence one last time before sitting up to straddle him again. Her faceless mask stares into his calming eyes, and of all the words that could have been said at that moment, none were spoken. There is nothing that describes the sensation this man in the bed feels as Tana severs the brachial artery, which pulsates through his upper arm. The blood splatters and squirts as she moves the tip of the blade to the base of his throat. It's just above his breastplate, and right below his Adam's apple where she plunges the knife straight down into his spinal column. She takes pleasure when the blade pinches as it breaks the skin, slides through flesh and cracks into the bone. The man in the bed will bleed out and feel nothing. She owes him that much. A painless death. He didn't whine. He didn't complain. He didn't beg. He imparted a few words of wisdom, and he silenced her voices if even for this last fleeting moment, they were quiet. As she leaves the suite, Tana sets the bed ablaze. While the flames dance across his body, charring everything they touch, she remembers his story. If her actions today will undoubtedly yield consequences for tomorrow, what will balance the removal of his life from her own? Hints of remorse dance around her heart for the first time ever after a kill. This death speaks to her. Without the voices, she's unable to do what she does, and with him gone there is no need to question her life without them. For those few minutes of silence, she is truly grateful. Tana resolves to be the balance brought to others and will continue to eliminate her targets as requested. At least until the universe deems her life necessary to maintain its even yoke. And with that, Barry, Lana, and Pee-wee begin the grand ruckus. The loudest voices she ever hears over her own, invading her thoughts and silencing her sanity.
As always, thanks for listening, watching. Hit that like and subscribe button.